Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Chapter 131. The Pequod Meets the Delight. The intense Pequod sailed on. The rolling waves and days passed by. The life buoy coffin still swung lightly. And another ship, sadly misnamed the Delight, was spotted. As she approached, all eyes were fixed on her broad beams, known as shears, which in some whaling ships cross the quarterdeck at a height of 8 or 9 feet to carry spare, unrigged, or disabled boats. On the stranger's shears, you could see the shattered white ribs and a few splintered planks of what had once been a whaleboat. But you could see through this wreck as clearly as you see through the peeled, half-unhinged, and bleached skeleton of a horse. "Have you seen the white whale?" "Look," replied the hollow-cheeked captain from his taffrail, pointing to the wreck with his trumpet. "Did you kill him?" "The harpoon is not yet forged that ever will do that," answered the other, glancing sadly at a rounded hammock on the deck, whose gathered sides some silent sailors were busy sewing together. "Not forged." Snatching Perth's leveled iron from its holder, Ahab held it out, exclaiming, "Look here, Nantucketer. In this hand I hold his death. Tempered in blood, and tempered by lightning are these barbs, and I swear to temper them thrice in that hot spot behind the fin where the white whale most feels his cursed life. Then God keep you, old man. Do you see that?" He pointed to the hammock. "I'm burying only one of 5 strong men who were alive just yesterday, but who were dead before night fell. Only that one I bury. The rest were buried before they died. You sail upon their tomb." Then, turning to his crew, he asked, "Are you ready there? Place the plank on the rail and lift the body. So then, oh, God," advancing toward the hammock with uplifted hands, "may the resurrection and the life, brace forward, up helm." Ahab cried suddenly, like lightning to his men. But the suddenly starting Pequod was not quick enough to escape the sound of the splash as the corpse hit the sea, not so quick that some of the flying bubbles didn't sprinkle her hull with their ghostly baptism. As Ahab now glided away from the dejected Delight, the strange life buoy hanging at the Pequod's stern became clearly visible. "Ha! Look yonder, men!" cried a foreboding voice in her wake. "In vain, oh, you strangers, you flee our sad burial. You only turn your stern to show us your coffin." Chapter 132. The Symphony. It was a clear, steel-blue day. The sky and sea blended together in the all-encompassing blue. Only the gentle air was transparently pure and soft, almost feminine, while the strong masculine sea heaved with long, powerful swells, like Samson's chest as he slept. High above, small, pure white birds glided effortlessly. These represented the gentle thoughts of the feminine air. Meanwhile, in the depths of the limitless blue, mighty creatures like leviathans, swordfish, and sharks rushed about. These were the strong, troubled, and fierce thoughts of the masculine sea. Despite their differences, the contrast was only superficial. The two seemed like one. It was only their gender that distinguished them. High above, the sun looked down like a royal czar, giving this gentle air to the bold and rolling sea, like a bride to her groom. At the horizon, a soft, trembling motion, most visible near the equator, indicated the tender, pulsing trust and loving concern with which the poor bride offered her heart. Ahab stood out against the clear morning, tied up and twisted, gnarled and knotted with wrinkles. His eyes glowed like embers still burning in the ashes of ruin. He lifted his battered brow to the beautiful sky. Oh, the immortal innocence of the blue. Invisible creatures flitting around us, sweet childhood of the air and sky. How unaware you were of Ahab's deep sorrow. I've seen little Miriam and Martha, laughing-eyed children, frolicking around their old father, playing with the singed hair that sprouted around the edge of the burnt-out crater in his mind. Ahab slowly crossed the deck from the scuttle, leaning over the side to watch his shadow sink deeper into the water, the harder he tried to see into its depths. For a moment, the lovely scents in that enchanted air seemed to lift the weight in his soul. That happy air, that beautiful sky, finally embraced him. The harsh world that had been cruel and forbidding now wrapped its arms around his stubborn neck, as if joyfully crying over him, like a mother who, despite her child's stubbornness and mistakes, still wanted to save and bless him. From beneath his slouched hat, Ahab let a tear fall into the sea, and not all the Pacific held such wealth as that single drop. Starbuck saw the old man leaning heavily over the side, and he felt the immense sorrow that seemed to emanate from the peaceful surroundings. Careful not to disturb him, he drew near and stood there. Ahab turned. "Starbuck, sir?" "Oh, Starbuck, it's a mild, gentle wind and a calm-looking sky. On a day like this, so sweet as this, I struck my first whale, an 18-year-old harpooner. 40 years ago, 40 years of continuous whaling, 40 years of hardship, danger, and storms, 40 years on this merciless sea. For 40 years, Ahab has left behind the peaceful land to wage war on the horrors of the deep. Yes, Starbuck, out of those 40 years, I've spent barely 3 on land. When I think about the life I've led, the loneliness it has brought me, the walled town of a captain's exclusiveness, which allows little sympathy from the green world outside, oh, what weariness, what a burden. Guinea Coast slavery of solitary command. When I think of all this, only half suspected before, and how for 40 years I've fed on dry, salted food, just like the dry nourishment of my soul, while the poorest landsman has had fresh fruit within reach and broken fresh bread over my moldy crusts. Away, whole oceans away, from that young girl wife I married after 50, sailing for Cape Horn the next day, leaving only one dent in my marriage pillow. Wife? Wife? More like a widow with her husband still alive. Yes, I widowed that poor girl when I married her, Starbuck. And then the madness, the frenzy, the boiling blood and the smoking brow with which old Ahab has relentlessly pursued his prey, more like a demon than a man. Yes, yes! What a fool I've been for 40 years. Fool, old fool. Why this chase? Why exhaust and numb my arm with the oar, the iron, and the lance? How is Ahab any richer or better now? Behold, O Starbuck, is it not cruel that, with this heavy burden I carry, one leg should have been taken from me? Here, brush this old hair aside. It blinds me, making me feel like I'm weeping. Locks so gray could only come from ashes. But do I look very old, so very, very old, Starbuck? I feel faint, hunched over, as if I were Adam, staggering beneath the centuries since paradise. God, 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 crack my heart, shatter my brain. What a mockery, mockery. Bitter, biting mockery of gray hairs. Have I lived long enough to wear you and feel this intolerably old? Come closer. Stand close to me, Starbuck. Let me look into a human eye. It's better than gazing into the sea or the sky. Better than looking at God, by the green land, by the bright hearth. This is the magic glass, man. I see my wife and child in your eye. No, stay on board. Don't lower the boat when I do, when branded Ahab chases Moby Dick. That risk is not yours. No, not with the faraway home I see in your eye. Oh, my captain, noble soul, grand old heart after all. Why should anyone chase that hated fish? Let's get out of here. Let's leave these deadly waters. Let's go home. Wife and child are Starbucks, your loving, longing, paternal old age just like yours, sir. Let's get away. This instant, let me change our course. How cheerfully, how happily, oh my captain, we could sail back to Nantucket. I think, sir, they have some gentle blue days like this in Nantucket. They do. I've seen them, some summer mornings. About this time. Yes, it's his noon nap now. The boy wakes up, sits up in bed, and his mother tells him about me, about old cannibal me, how I'm out on the deep, but will come back to dance with him again. It's my Mary herself. She promised that my boy would be taken to the hill every morning to catch the first glimpse of his father's sail. Yes, no more. It's done. We're heading for Nantucket. Come, my captain, plot the course, and let's go. Look, there's the boy's face at the window, the boy's hand on the hill. But Ahab looked away, trembling like a blighted fruit tree, tossing away his last cindered apple to the ground. What is it? What nameless, inscrutable, unearthly thing is it? What hidden lord and cruel, remorseless master commands me, that against all natural love and longing, I keep pushing, crowding, and forcing myself on, recklessly preparing to do what I don't even dare to consider? Is Ahab really Ahab? Is it I, God, or who is it that lifts this arm? But if the great sun doesn't move on its own, if it's just an errand boy in heaven, and no star can move without some invisible power, how then can this one small heart beat, this one small brain think, unless God is doing the beating, the thinking, the living, and not me? By heaven, man, we're spun around in this world like that windlass, and fate is the handspike. And all the while, look, that smiling sky and this endless sea. Look, see that albacore. Who put it in him to chase that flying fish? Where do murderers go, man? Who's to judge when the judge himself is dragged to the stand? But it's a mild, mild wind and a calm-looking sky, and the air now smells like it's blowing from a distant meadow. They've been making hay somewhere under the slopes of the Andes, Starbuck, and the workers are sleeping in the freshly cut hay. Sleeping? Yes, no matter how hard we toil, we all end up sleeping in the fields. Sleep? Yes, and rust among the greenery, like last year's scythes left down among the half-cut grass, Starbuck. But pale and despairing, the mate had slipped away. Ahab crossed the deck to look over the other side, but started at the sight of two fixed eyes reflected in the water. Fedallah was leaning motionless over the same rail. Chapter 133. The Chase, First Day. That night, during the mid-watch, the old man, like he often did, came out from the hatch where he leaned and walked to his pivot hole. Suddenly, he thrust his face out fiercely, inhaling the sea air like a clever ship's dog approaching some wild island. He declared that a whale must be nearby. Soon, that distinctive odor emitted by a living sperm whale reached everyone on watch. No sailor was surprised when, after checking the compass and the dog vane and determining the direction of the scent as closely as possible, Ahab quickly ordered a slight course change and for the sails to be shortened. The smart strategy behind these actions was confirmed at daybreak when they spotted a long, sleek shape in the water ahead, smooth as oil, resembling the polished metallic marks left by swift tidal currents at the mouth of a deep stream. "Man the mastheads! Call all hands!" Daggoo thundered on the forecastle deck, rousing the sleepers with such powerful claps that they appeared instantly from the hatch, dressed and ready. "What do you see?" Ahab shouted, flattening his face to the sky. "Nothing, nothing, sir," came the reply from below. "Top-gallant sails, stun sails. Set them all, aloft and on both sides." Once all the sails were set, he released the lifeline meant for hoisting him to the main royal mast head. A few moments later, as they hoisted him up, while still 2/3 of the way up, he peered ahead between the main topsail and top-gallant sail and let out a cry like a gull. "There she blows! There she blows! A hump like a snow hill! It's Moby Dick!" Excited by Ahab's call, which the three lookouts echoed, the men on deck rushed to the rigging to catch a glimpse of the legendary whale they had been pursuing for so long. Ahab reached his final perch, several feet above the other lookouts, with Tashtego just below him on the top gallant mast, so that Tashtego's head was almost level with Ahab's heel. From this height, they saw the whale about a mile ahead, its high, sparkling hump revealing itself with each roll of the sea, silently spouting air into the atmosphere. To the eager sailors, it seemed like the same silent spout they had seen long ago in the moonlit Atlantic and Indian Oceans. "Didn't any of you see it before?" Ahab shouted to the men perched around him. "I saw it almost at the same moment Captain Ahab did, and I cried out," said Tashtego. "Not the same moment, not the same. No, the doubloon is mine. Fate has reserved the doubloon for me. I alone, none of you could have spotted the white whale first. There she blows! There she blows! There she blows! There again! There again!" he shouted in drawn-out rhythmic tones, matching the whale's visible spouts. "He's going to sound in stun sails. Down top-gallant sails. Stand by 3 boats. Mr. Starbuck, remember to stay on board and keep the ship steady. Helm there. Luff, luff a point. Steady, man, steady. There go the flukes. No, just black water. Are the boats ready? Stand by. Lower me, Mr. Starbuck. Lower, lower. Quicker." And he slid through the air to the deck. "He's heading straight away from us, sir," shouted Stubb. "Cannot have seen the ship yet." "Shut up, man. Stand by the braces. Hard down the helm. Brace up. Shiver her! Shiver her! That's it! Boats, boats!" Soon all the boats except Starbuck's were lowered, all the sails set, all the paddles moving swiftly as they sped to leeward, with Ahab leading the charge. A pale, death-like glimmer lit up Fedallah's sunken eyes, and a ghastly twitching contorted his mouth. Like silent nautilus shells, their sleek prows glided through the water, but they drew closer to their target slowly. As they approached, the ocean became even smoother, as if it were laying a carpet over its waves, resembling a peaceful meadow. Finally, the breathless hunters got so close to their seemingly unsuspecting prey that they could distinctly see the whale's bright hump gliding along the sea, surrounded by a swirling ring of delicate, greenish foam. They spotted the vast, intricate wrinkles of the whale's head slightly projecting out of the water. Far out on the gentle, rug-like surface of the water, The shining white shadow of its broad, milky forehead moved, accompanied by a melodic ripple. Behind it, blue waters flowed into the valley of its steady wake, while bright bubbles danced beside it. But these bubbles were interrupted by the delicate toes of hundreds of colorful seabirds, softly feathering the sea as they flew back and forth. A tall, broken lance pole, a remnant of a recent attack, protruded from the white whale's back. Occasionally, one of the soft-footed birds would hover and skim silently over the whale, perching on the pole, its long tail feathers streaming like banners. A gentle joyfulness, a powerful tranquility and swift motion enveloped the gliding whale. It was not the white bull Jupiter swimming away with the ravished Europa clinging to his graceful horns. Not Jupiter, with his lovely leering eyes set sideways on the maiden. Not even that great supreme majesty surpassed the glorified white whale as he swam so divinely. On each soft side, coinciding with the parted swell that flowed away from him, the whale shed off allurements. It's no wonder that some of the hunters, charmed and captivated by this serenity, had dared to attack, only to find that calmness to be the disguise of storms. Yet calm, enticing calm, O whale, you glide on, captivating anyone who sees you for the first time, no matter how many others you've tricked and destroyed before. Thus, through the serene tranquility of the tropical sea, among waves whose applause was stilled by overwhelming delight, Moby Dick moved on. Still concealing the full horrors of his submerged body, entirely hiding the gruesome shape of his jaw. Soon, the front part of him slowly rose from the water. For a moment, his entire marble-like body formed a high arch like Virginia's natural bridge, and warningly waving his bannered flukes in the air, the great god revealed himself, dove down, and disappeared from view. Hovering above the disturbed pool he left behind, the white seabirds lingered longingly. With oars raised and paddles lowered, the sails slack, the three boats floated quietly, waiting for Moby Dick to reappear. "An hour," Ahab said, standing rooted in the stern of his boat as he gazed beyond the whale's location toward the dim blue spaces and inviting expanses to leeward. It was just for a moment, as his eyes seemed to whirl around in his head while he scanned the watery circle. The breeze picked up, the sea began to swell. "The birds! The birds!" Tashtego shouted. In a long line, like herons taking flight, the white birds were all flying toward Ahab's boat. As they got closer, they began fluttering over the water, circling around and making joyful, excited cries. Their vision was sharper than a human's. Ahab couldn't see any signs in the sea. But suddenly, as he peered down into the depths, he noticed a small white spot, no bigger than a weasel, rising quickly and growing larger as it came up. It turned, revealing two long, crooked rows of glistening white teeth, floating up from the unseen depths below. It was Moby Dick's open mouth and curved jaw, his massive body still blending with the blue of the sea. The sparkling mouth yawned beneath the boat like an open marble tomb, and with one swift motion of his steering oar, Ahab steered the boat away from this terrifying sight. Then, calling for Fedallah to switch places with him, he moved to the front of the boat, grabbed Perth's harpoon, and ordered his crew to get their oars ready. Because of this timely turn, the front of the boat was now facing the whale's head while it was still submerged. But sensing this tactic, Moby Dick quickly shifted position, gliding his massive head directly beneath the boat. The whale surged through the boat, lying on its back like a shark, slowly and deliberately bringing the bow into his mouth, so that the long, curved lower jaw lifted high into the air, and one of the teeth got caught in a rowlock. The bluish-white interior of the jaw was only 6 inches from Ahab's head, reaching even higher. In this position, the white whale shook the fragile cedar boat like a cat playing with a mouse. Fedallah looked on calmly, arms crossed, while the terrified crew scrambled over each other to reach the back of the boat. As the boat's sides flexed in and out, the whale toyed with the doomed vessel in this cruel way. Since his body was underwater, they couldn't attack from the front, as the bow was almost inside him. Other boats hesitated, faced with a crisis that seemed impossible to escape. Frantic with rage at being so close to his enemy, trapped in the very jaws he despised, grabbed the long bone with his bare hands, desperately trying to wrench it free. As he struggled, the jaw slipped from his grasp, and the flimsy sides of the boat bent inward, collapsed, and broke apart as both jaws, like giant scissors, slid further back, completely severing the boat in two and locking themselves in the sea between the two floating wrecks. The pieces floated apart, the broken ends drooping, with the crew at the stern holding onto the sides and trying to keep their oars from drifting away. In that moment, before the boat was snapped in two, Ahab was the first to sense the whale's intentions when it raised its head, a movement that caused him to lose his grip momentarily. He had just made a final effort to push the boat out of danger, but as he slipped further into the whale's mouth and tilted sideways, the boat lost its hold on the jaw, throwing him flat onto the sea. Moby Dick, having released his prey, now lay a short distance away, vertically bobbing his long white head up and down in the waves while slowly spinning his massive body. When his large, wrinkled forehead rose about 20 feet above the water, the waves crashed against it, throwing spray high into the air, like how waves break against the base of the Eddystone Lighthouse, only to leap triumphantly over its top. But soon, resuming his horizontal position, Moby Dick swam swiftly around the wrecked crew, churning the water in his vengeful wake, as if preparing for another deadly attack. The sight of the shattered boat seemed to drive him into a frenzy, much like how grapes and mulberries thrown before Antiochus's elephants enraged them. Meanwhile, Ahab, half buried in the foam from the whale's thrashing tail and too injured to swim, though he could still stay afloat even in such a chaotic whirlpool, was left helpless, his head bobbing like a bubble that could burst at any moment. From the splintered stern of the boat, Fedallah watched him indifferently, while the crew at the other end clung to their own survival. The white whale's fearsome appearance and the dizzying circles he made seemed to engulf them, as he appeared to be swooping in on them. Though the other boats were unharmed and nearby, they dared not approach the whirlpool to attack, fearing it would signal instant destruction for the stranded crew, including Ahab, and they knew they wouldn't escape either. Straining their eyes, they remained on the outer edge of the dangerous area, which now centered on Ahab's head. Meanwhile, all of this was being observed from the mastheads of the ship, which quickly altered course and bore down on the scene, getting so close that Ahab called out to her from the water, "Sail on the..." But at that moment, a wave from Moby Dick crashed into him, temporarily submerging him. Struggling to resurface, he managed to rise on a high wave and shouted, "Sail on the whale! Drive him off!" The Pequod's bow was pointed toward Moby Dick, and as it broke through the charmed circle, it effectively separated the white whale from his prey. As Moby Dick swam off sulkily, the boats rushed in to rescue Ahab. Pulled into Stubbs' boat, Ahab had bloodshot blind eyes, with the white foam caking in his creases. The tension in his body finally broke, and he helplessly submitted to his fate, lying crushed in the bottom of Stubbs' boat like a creature trampled by a herd of elephants. From deep within him, nameless wails escaped, desolate sounds rising from ravines. But this intensity of physical collapse only made it shorter. In an instant, strong hearts can condense their experiences into a deep pang that sums up all the shallow pains that weaker men feel throughout their lives. Such hearts, though they feel intense suffering in each moment, if the gods decree it, can accumulate an entire lifetime of sorrow, formed entirely from these powerful experiences. For even at their core, those noble spirits hold the entire breadth of lesser souls. "The harpoon," Ahab said, half rising and leaning on one bent arm. "Is it safe?" "Yes, sir, it wasn't thrown. Here it is," Stubb replied, showing it to him. "Lay it in front of me. Are there any missing men?" 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 oars, and here are 5 men. "That's good. Help me up. I want to stand. There! I see him. Look, there he goes to leeward. What a huge spout. Hands off." The strength is coming back to Ahab's bones. Set the sail, put out the oars, take the helm. Often, when a boat is damaged, its crew is picked up by another boat and helps to row that one, continuing the chase with what's called double-banked oars. That's what happened here. But the extra power of the boat didn't match the whale's strength, as he seemed to be swimming with the force of 3 boats, moving at a speed that made it clear that if they pushed on like this, the chase would be indefinitely long, if not hopeless. No crew could maintain such intense rowing for too long. It was only bearable for a short burst. So, the ship itself offered the best chance to catch up. The boats headed toward her and were soon raised to their cranes, having secured the two parts of the wrecked boat, and then, hoisting everything to her side and stacking the sails high, the Pequod sailed in the leeward path of Moby Dick. The crew in the mastheads regularly announced the whale's shimmering spouts, and when he was reported as just going down, Ahab would wait, pacing the deck with the binnacle in hand. As soon as the last second of the allotted hour was up, he would shout, "Whose doubloon is it now? Do you see him?" If the reply was, "No, sir," he would immediately order them to lift him up to his perch. And so the day went on, Ahab, now up high and still, then pacing restlessly across the deck. As he walked, making no sound except to call to the men above, or to instruct them to hoist a sail higher or spread one wider, he paced back and forth, his slouched hat shadowing his face. Each time he passed his wrecked boat, which had been placed on the quarterdeck and lay upside down, broken bow to shattered stern, he finally stopped in front of it. A deep gloom passed over him, like fresh clouds covering an already overcast sky. Stubb noticed him pause, and perhaps wanting to show his own unwavering courage and keep up a brave image in Ahab's eyes, approached the wreck and said, "The thistle the donkey wouldn't eat. It pricked his mouth too sharply. Ha ha! What soulless thing laughs before a wreck? Man, if I didn't know you were as brave as fire, and as mechanical, I would swear you were a coward. Neither groans nor laughter should be heard in front of a wreck." "Aye, sir," said Starbuck, moving closer. "It's a solemn sight, an omen, and a bad one." "Omen? Omen? Get the dictionary. If the gods wanted to speak plainly to man, they would do so directly. They wouldn't shake their heads and give some vague hint. Go away. You two are the opposite ends of the same thing. Starbuck is Stubb reversed, and Stubb is Starbuck, and you both represent all of mankind. Ahab stands alone among the millions of people on earth. Neither gods nor men are his neighbors. Cold, cold. I shiver. Now look up there. Do you see him? Shout out for every spout, even if he's spouting 10 times a second." The day was almost over. Only the edge of his golden robe was rustling. Soon it was nearly dark, but the lookout men remained vigilant. "I can't see the spout now, sir. It's too dark," came a voice from above. "How was he heading when last seen?" "Just like before, sir. Straight to leeward." "Good. He'll swim slower now that it's night. Down with the royal and top-gallant stunsails, Mr. Starbuck. We mustn't run over him before morning. He's making his way now and might stop for a while. Helm there. Keep her full before the wind. Come down aloft. Mr. Stubb, send a fresh crewman to the foremast head and make sure it's manned until morning." Then, moving toward the doubloon on the main mast, he said, "Men, this gold is mine because I earned it. But I'll leave it here until the white whale is dead. Whoever raises him first on the day he's killed will get this gold. And if I see him again on that day, 10 times its value will be shared among all of you. Now go. The deck is yours, sir." With that, he positioned himself halfway into the scuttle, tilted his hat, and stood there until dawn, except for the times he roused himself to check on how the night was going. Chapter 134. The Chase, Second Day. At daybreak, the 3 mastheads were promptly manned again. "Do you see him?" Ahab shouted, giving the light a moment to spread. "See nothing, sir," came the reply. "Gather everyone and make sail. He's moving faster than I expected. Top-gallant sails. They should have been up all night, but no matter, it's just resting for the rush." It should be noted that the relentless pursuit of a single whale, continuing day into night and night into day, is not uncommon in the South Sea fishery. Some skilled Nantucket captains have developed such a remarkable ability based on experience and intuition that from simply observing a whale when last seen, they can predict with surprising accuracy the direction it will swim while out of sight, as well as its likely speed during that time. In these situations, it's like a pilot about to lose sight of a coast he knows well and wants to return to later at a different point. The pilot stands by his compass, taking the exact bearing of the visible cape to better navigate to a distant, unseen headland. Similarly, after chasing and tracking a whale for several hours of daylight, when night falls and obscures the creature, the hunter's understanding of the whale's future movements is almost as reliable as the pilot's knowledge of the coast. To the skilled hunter, the fleeting wake of the whale is as dependable as solid land. Just as people can time the movements of the modern railway's mighty iron leviathan, saying the up train or the down train will reach a certain spot at a specific time, the Nantucket whalers can sometimes estimate how far a whale will travel in a few hours based on its speed. However, for this expertise to be effective, the wind and sea must work in the whaleman's favor. What good is the skill of a mariner who knows he's exactly 93 leagues and a quarter from port if he's stuck without wind? From these statements, many other subtle matters regarding the chase of whales can be inferred. The ship sped on, leaving a trail in the sea like a cannonball that misses its mark and plows through a field. "By salt and hemp," Stubb exclaimed. "This swift motion of the deck creeps up my legs and tingles at my heart. This ship and I are two brave fellows. Ha ha! Someone throw me out and launch me, spine first, into the sea, because by the live oaks my spine is like a keel. Ha! Ha! We're going at a pace that leaves no dust behind." "There she blows! She blows! She blows! Right ahead!" was the cry from the masthead. "Aye, aye!" shouted Stubb. "I knew it. You can't escape. Blow and burst your spout, O whale. The mad fiend himself is after you. Blow your trumpet, blister your lungs. Ahab will dam up your blood like a miller shuts his water gate." Stubb's excitement echoed the feelings of nearly all the crew. By this point, the adrenaline of the chase had worked them into a frenzy, like old wine stirred up anew. Any fears or doubts some of them had felt before were now overshadowed by the awe they felt for Ahab, dissipated like timid prairie hares fleeing from a charging bison. Fate had seized their souls, and through the exciting dangers of the previous day, the tension of the night before, and the reckless way their ship surged toward its target, their hearts raced. The wind filled their sails, propelling the vessel forward with invisible, irresistible force, symbolizing the unseen power that drove them to pursue. They were united as one, not 30 individuals. Just as the ship was built from contrasting materials, oak, maple, and pine, iron, pitch, and hemp, all these elements came together in one solid hull, guided by the long central keel. In the same way, all the individual personalities of the crew, this man's bravery, that man's fear, guilt, and innocence, merged into one purpose, all aimed at the fatal goal that Ahab, their one leader and keel, directed them toward. The rigging was alive. The mastheads, like tall palm trees, were adorned with arms and legs. Some clung to a spar with one hand while waving the other in excitement. Others shaded their eyes from the bright sunlight as they sat far out on the swaying yards, all ready for whatever fate awaited them. Ah, how they strained through that endless blue to find the thing that might destroy them. "Why aren't you shouting if you see him?" Ahab called out when, after several minutes since the first cry, no further reports had come. "Hoist me up, men. You've been mistaken. Moby Dick isn't spouting odd jets in that direction and then disappearing." Indeed, in their rush of excitement, the crew had mistaken something else for the whale's spout, as the event soon proved. Hardly had Ahab reached his perch and secured the rope when he struck the keynote to an orchestra that made the air vibrate like the combined sound of rifles. The triumphant shout of 30 voices echoed as Moby Dick suddenly appeared, much closer to the ship than the spot where the imaginary spout had been, less than a mile ahead. The white whale didn't reveal himself with calm and leisurely spoutings or the peaceful gush from the mysterious fountain on his head. He emerged with the more spectacular act of breaching. Shooting up with great speed from the depths, the sperm whale leaped into the air, creating a mountain of dazzling foam that marked his location for miles. In those moments, the churned and furious waves he shook off appeared like his mane, and in some cases, this breaching was an act of defiance. "There she breaches! There she breaches!" came the cry as the white whale hurled himself into the sky like a salmon. Seen suddenly against the blue sea and the even bluer sky, the spray he kicked up glittered and glared like a glacier, gradually fading from its initial brilliance to the misty haze of an approaching shower in a valley. "Yeah, breach for the sun one last time, Moby Dick," shouted Ahab. "Your time and harpoon are here. Everyone get down, except for one man at the front. Get the boats ready." Ignoring the slow rope ladders, the men slid down to the deck like shooting stars, using the backstays and halyards, while Ahab, moving quickly but not as fast, was lowered from his perch. "Lower away," he called as soon as he reached his boat, a spare one rigged the previous afternoon. "Mr. Starbuck, the ship is yours. Stay away from the boats, but keep them close. Lower them all." To instill a sense of fear in them, Moby Dick had turned and was now charging at the three boats. Ahab's boat was in the center, and encouraging his crew, he told them he would confront the whale head-on, meaning they would row straight toward his forehead. This tactic is common since it prevents the whale from seeing the boats out of the corner of its eye until they're very close. However, before they could get too close, and while all three boats were clearly visible, the white whale surged forward, opening its massive jaws and thrashing its tail, ready to attack from all sides. Ignoring the harpoons being thrown at him, Moby Dick seemed solely focused on destroying the boats. The crew skillfully maneuvered, constantly circling like trained horses in a field, and for a while they managed to avoid him, sometimes just barely. Ahab's eerie battle cry drowned out all other sounds. Eventually, in his unpredictable movements, the white whale tangled the slack lines connected to all three boats, pulling them toward his own weapons as he suddenly paused to prepare for an even bigger assault. Seizing the opportunity, Ahab let out more line and then quickly pulled it in again, hoping to untangle it. But then he saw something more frightening than a shark's teeth. Caught and twisted in the lines, loose harpoons and lances with their sharp barbs came flashing and dripping up to the front of Ahab's boat. He knew he had to act fast. Grabbing a knife, he carefully cut through the tangled mess and passed the line inside to the bowman, then cut the rope near the chocks, tossing the pile of metal into the sea. In that moment, the white whale surged again, dragging the more entangled boats of Stubb and Flask toward his tail, crashing them together like two shells on a stormy beach before diving into the sea, leaving behind a swirling mass of wreckage, where cedar chips spun around like nutmeg in a stirred punch bowl. As the two crews floated in the water, reaching for the drifting line, tubs, oars, and other debris, Flask bobbed up and down like an empty bottle, trying to keep his legs above water to avoid the jaws of sharks. Stubb called out for someone to help him, while Ahab's line, now breaking, allowed him to pull into the frothy area to rescue whoever he could. Amid the chaos of 1,000 dangers, Ahab's unstruck boat seemed to be lifted toward the sky by invisible wires as the white whale slammed into its bottom, flipping it over and sending Ahab and his crew struggling out from underneath like seals escaping a cave. The whale's initial momentum changed its direction as it hit the surface, pushing it away from the center of the destruction it had caused. With its back to the wreckage, it lay there for a moment, feeling with its flukes from side to side. Every time a stray oar or bit of plank touched its skin, its tail quickly pulled back, slapping the sea. But soon, satisfied that its work was done, the whale pushed its pleated forehead through the water and, dragging the tangled lines behind it, swam away at a steady pace. Meanwhile, the ship, having witnessed the entire fight, returned to rescue the floating sailors, oars, and whatever else they could find, safely bringing them aboard. There were sprained shoulders, wrists and ankles, bruises, broken harpoons and lances, tangled ropes, shattered oars and planks. All injuries were minor. Like Fadala the day before, Ahab was found clinging to a piece of his broken boat, which provided some flotation, and he wasn't as exhausted as he had been the day before. When he was helped onto the deck, everyone's eyes were on him. Instead of standing on his own, he leaned on Starbuck, who had been the first to assist him. His ivory leg had snapped off, leaving a short, sharp splinter. "Yeah, Starbuck, it's nice to lean sometimes, no matter who's doing the leaning. I wish old Ahab had leaned more often." "The ferrule didn't hold, sir," the carpenter said as he approached. "I did good work on that leg." "I hope no bones are broken, sir," Stubb said with genuine concern. "Yeah, and all splintered to pieces, Stubb. Do you see it? But even with a broken bone, old Ahab is unbothered. I don't consider any living bone of mine more a part of me than this dead one that's lost. No white whale, no man, no fiend can touch old Ahab in his true self. Can any lead touch that floor or any mast scrape that roof? Aloft there." "Which way?" "Dead to leeward, sir." "Then turn the helm, raise the sails again, shipkeepers. Bring down the other spare boats and rig them. Mr. Starbuck, go and gather the boat crews." "Let me help you to the bulwarks first, sir." "Oh, how this splinter hurts me now. Accursed fate, that the unbeatable captain of my soul should have such a cowardly mate." Sir? My body man, not you. Give me something for a cane. There, that broken lance will do. Gather the men. Surely I haven't seen him yet. By heaven it can't be. Missing? Quick, call them all. Ahab's thought turned out to be correct. When they mustered the crew, the Parsee was nowhere to be found. The Parsee, shouted Stubb. He must have been caught in. May the black vomit take you. Everyone up, down, in the cabin, forecastle. Find him. Not gone, not gone. But they quickly returned with the news that the Parsee was nowhere to be found. Yeah, sir, said Stubb. Caught in the tangle of your line. I thought I saw him being dragged under. My line? My line? Gone? What does that little word mean? What death knell rings in it that makes old Ahab tremble like a bell? The harpoon, too. Toss over the debris. Do you see it? The forged iron men, the white whales, no, no, no. Blistered fool. This hand threw it, it's in the fish. Aloft there. Keep him pinned. Quick, everyone to the rigging of the boats. Collect the oars, harpooneers. The irons. Raise the royals higher. Pull on all the sheets. Steady, steady for your life. I'll circle the entire globe, yes, and dive straight through it, but I'll kill him yet. Great God! Just show yourself for a single moment, cried Starbuck. You'll never capture him, old man. In Jesus' name, no more of this madness. It's worse than the devil's insanity. 2 days chasing him, twice smashed to pieces, your leg taken from you again, your evil shadow gone, all good angels warning you. What more do you want? Shall we keep chasing this murderous fish until he swamps the last man? Shall we be dragged down to the depths of the sea? Shall we be towed to hell? Oh, impiety and blasphemy to hunt him further. Starbuck, lately I've felt strangely drawn to you, ever since that hour we both saw, you know what, in each other's eyes. But regarding this whale, keep your face to me like the palm of this hand, no expression, no features. Ahab is forever Ahab, man. This entire act is unchangeably decreed. It was rehearsed by you and me 1 billion years before this ocean rolled. Fool, I am the lieutenant of fate. I act under orders. Look here, underling, you will obey me. Stand around me, men. You see an old man cut down to the stump, leaning on a shattered lance, propped up on a lonely foot. That's Ahab, his body's part, but Ahab's soul is a centipede, moving on 100 legs. I feel strained, half-stranded, like ropes towing dismasted ships in a gale, and I may look that way. But before I break, you'll hear me crack. And until you hear that, know that Ahab's hawser is still towing his purpose. Do you believe in omens, men? Then laugh out loud and shout encore. For before they drown, drowning things will rise twice to the surface, then rise again to sink forever. So it is with Moby Dick. He's floated for 2 days. Tomorrow will be the 3rd. Yes, men, he'll rise again, but only to spout his last. Do you feel brave, men? Brave? As fearless as fire, cried Stubb. And as mechanical, muttered Ahab. Then, as the men moved forward, he continued muttering, the thing's called omens, and yesterday I spoke to Starbuck about my broken boat. Oh, how valiantly I try to drive from others' hearts what's firmly lodged in mine. The Parsee. Gone, and he was supposed to go before, but still was supposed to be seen again before I perish. What's that? There's a riddle that could baffle all the lawyers backed by the ghosts of judges past. Like a hawk's beak, it pecks at my brain. I'll solve it, though. When dusk fell, the whale was still visible to leeward. So once again, the sail was shortened, and everything happened almost as it had the night before. Only the sound of hammers and the hum of the grindstone could be heard until nearly dawn, as the men worked by lantern light, carefully rigging the spare boats and sharpening their fresh weapons for the next day. Meanwhile, the carpenter made Ahab a new leg from the broken keel of his wrecked boat. Just as the night before, Ahab stood slouched in his scuttle, his hidden purple gaze anticipating the sun's return, facing eastward for the earliest light. Chapter 135, The Chase. 3rd day. The morning of the 3rd day dawned bright and fresh. Once again, the solitary lookout at the foremast was replaced by a crowd of day crew scattered across every mast and nearly every spar. Do you see him? Ahab shouted, but the whale was still out of sight. He's in his unmistakable wake. Just follow that wake, that's all. Helm there, steady as you've been. What a beautiful day. It's as if a new world has been created, one perfect for angels to enjoy. This morning could not be more perfect. Ahab might have had some deep thoughts if he had the time, but he never thinks. He only feels. That's plenty for any mortal. To think is audacity. Only God has the right to think. Thinking should be calm and cool, while our hearts race and our brains pulse too much for that. Yet I've sometimes thought my mind was calm, frozen calm, like a glass that cracks when its contents freeze. But my hair is still growing. It's growing at this moment, and it must be heat that causes it. But no, it's like that common grass that can grow anywhere, even between the icy crevices of Greenland or the lava of Vesuvius. The wild winds whip around me like torn sails lashing a tossed ship. A wretched wind that has surely blown through prison halls and hospital wards now comes here, seeming as innocent as clouds. Out with it. It's tainted. If I were the wind, I'd stop blowing on such a wicked, miserable world. I'd crawl into a cave and hide there. Yet the wind is noble and heroic. Who has ever conquered it? In every battle, it has the final, harsh blow. Run toward it, and you just run through it. Ha! A cowardly wind that strikes defenseless men but won't stand to take a single blow. Even Ahab is braver, a nobler thing than that. If only the wind had a body, but all the things that frustrate and outrage humans are bodiless, only as objects, not as agents. There's a specific, cunning, and malicious difference. Yet, I say again, and swear it now, that there's something glorious and gracious in the wind. At least these warm trade winds that blow straight and steady in clear skies. They don't veer from their course, even when the lesser currents of the sea twist and turn, and even the mighty Mississippi swerves, uncertain where to go. By the eternal poles. These same trade winds that so directly propel my good ship, these winds, or something like them, something so unchanging and strong, are pushing my very soul along. Up there, what do you see? Nothing, sir. Nothing, and it's almost noon. The doubloon goes begging. Look at the sun. Aye, it must be true. I've overshot him. How did that happen? Aye, he's chasing me now, not the other way around. That's not good. I should have known better. Fool, the lines, the harpoons he's dragging. Aye, I've left him behind since last night. About! Everyone down except the regular lookouts. Man the braces. With the wind on the Pequod's quarter, now that the ship was pointed in the opposite direction, she sailed hard on the breeze, churning her own white wake. Against the wind, he's steering for the open mouth, Starbuck murmured to himself as he coiled the newly hauled main brace on the rail. God help us, but I can already feel a chill in my bones, and it's soaking into my flesh. I fear that by obeying him, I'm disobeying God. Be ready to hoist me up, Ahab shouted as he approached the hempen basket. We should meet him soon. Aye, aye, sir, Starbuck replied, and immediately did Ahab's bidding, lifting him up high once more. An entire hour passed. It felt like ages. Time itself seemed to hold its breath in suspense. But at last, Ahab spotted the spout again, about 3 points off the weather bow, and instantly 3 shrieks rang out from the mastheads as if tongues of fire had voiced it. Forehead to forehead, I meet you for the 3rd time, Moby Dick. On deck, brace tighter, steer her into the wind's eye. He's too far to lower the boats yet, Mr. Starbuck. The sails are shaking. Stand over that helmsman with a top maul. So, he's moving fast, and I must go down. But let me have one more good look at the sea. There's time for that. It's an old sight, yet somehow still feels young. And it hasn't changed a bit since I first saw it as a boy from the sandhills of Nantucket. The same, just as it was for Noah. There's a soft rain to leeward, such lovely weather. It must lead somewhere better than common land, more lush than palm trees. Leeward, the white whale goes that way. Look to windward then, the better if it's the bitter quarter. But goodbye, old masthead. What's this? Green? Aye, tiny mosses in these warped cracks. No such weathered stains on Ahab's head. That's the difference between man's old age and the aging of matter. But aye, old mast, we both grow old together. Sound in our hulls, though, aren't we, my ship? I minus a leg, that's all. By heaven, this dead wood outshines my live flesh in every way. I can't compare with it, and I've seen ships made from dead trees outlive men made from the most vital stuff of living fathers. What's that he said? He would still go before me, my pilot, and yet be seen again. But where? Will I have eyes at the bottom of the sea if I descend those endless stairs? And all night I've been sailing away from him, wherever he sank. Aye, like many others, you told the harsh truth about yourself, O Parsi, but Ahab, there your shot fell short. Goodbye, masthead. Keep a good watch on the whale while I'm gone. We'll talk tomorrow, nay tonight, when the white whale lies down there, tied by head and tail. He gave the command, and still gazing around him, was lowered steadily through the clear blue air to the deck. Eventually, the boats were lowered. But as Ahab stood in the stern of his boat, hovering just above the descent, he waved to the mate, who was holding one of the tackle ropes on deck, and told him to pause. "Starbuck, sir. For the third time, my soul's ship sets out on this journey, Starbuck. Aye, sir, if that's how you want it. Some ships sail from their ports and are never seen again. Truth, sir, the saddest truth. Some men die at ebb tide, some at low water, some at the height of the flood, and I feel now like a wave that's nothing but a crest, Starbuck. I am old. Shake hands with me, man." Their hands met, their eyes locked. Starbuck's tears were the glue. "Oh, my captain, noble heart, don't go, don't go. See, it's a brave man who weeps. How great the agony of the persuasion then." "Lower away," Ahab shouted, tossing the mate's arm away from him. "Stand by the crew." In an instant, the boat pulled around close under the stern. "The sharks! The sharks!" cried a voice from the low cabin window. "Oh, master, my master, come back!" But Ahab heard nothing. His own voice was lifted high as the boat leaped forward. Yet the voice spoke the truth. Scarcely had he pushed away from the ship when a swarm of sharks, seemingly rising from the dark waters beneath the hull, viciously snapped at the blades of the oars every time they dipped into the water, following the boat with their bites. This is something that often happens to whaleboats in those shark-infested seas. Sometimes the sharks seem to follow them just like vultures hover over the flags of marching regiments in the east. But these were the first sharks that the Pequod had seen since the white whale had first been spotted. Whether it was because Ahab's crew were all such fierce, tiger-yellow savages that their flesh smelled more appealing to the sharks, a fact that is sometimes known to attract them, or whatever the reason, they seemed to follow that one boat without bothering the others. "Heart of steel," murmured Starbuck, gazing over the side and watching the receding boat. "Can you still ring boldly to that sight, lowering your keel among ravenous sharks, and followed by them, open-mouthed for the chase, and this is the critical third day? When 3 days flow together in one continuous and intense pursuit, the first is morning, the second is noon, and the third is the evening and the end of that thing, whatever that end may be. Oh my God, what is this feeling that shoots through me, leaving me deadly calm yet expectant, fixed at the top of a shutter? Future events swim before me like empty outlines and skeletons. The past has grown dim. Mary, girl, you fade in pale glories behind me. Boy, I only see your wonderfully blue eyes. The strangest problems of life seem to be clearing up, but clouds keep sweeping in. Is the end of my journey coming? My legs feel weak, like someone who has walked all day. Feel your heart. Does it still beat? Stir yourself, Starbuck. Stave it off. Move, move. Speak up. Masthead there. Do you see my boy's hand on the hill? Crazed, up there. Keep your keenest eye on the boats. Mark well the whale. Hey, again, drive off that hawk. Look, he pecks, he tears the vane, pointing to the red flag flying at the main mast. Ha, he soars away with it. Where's the old man now? Do you see that sight, O Ahab? Shudder, shudder. The boats hadn't gone very far when Ahab saw a signal from the mastheads, a downward pointing arm, indicating that the whale had sounded. But wanting to be close to him at the next surfacing, he held his course slightly away from the vessel, while the entranced crew maintained a deep silence as the waves pounded relentlessly against the bow. Drive your nails in, O waves! Drive them all the way in! You strike a thing without a lid. No coffin and no hearse can be mine. Only hemp can kill me. Ha! Ha! Suddenly, the waters around them swelled in broad circles, then quickly heaved as if sliding sideways from a submerged iceberg, swiftly rising to the surface. A low rumbling sound was heard, a subterranean hum. Then everyone held their breath as a vast form, tangled with trailing ropes, harpoons, and lances, shot up from the sea. Wrapped in a thin veil of mist, it hovered momentarily in the rainbowed air and then fell back into the depths. Water flashed upward like fountains before crashing down in a shower of flakes, leaving the surface creamed like fresh milk around the whale's marble trunk. "Give way!" cried Ahab to the oarsmen, and the boat surged forward to attack. But driven mad by the fresh iron lodged in him from the day before, Moby Dick seemed to be possessed by all the fallen angels. The thick muscles across his broad white forehead looked like they were knitted together as he came charging toward the boats, churning his tail among them. Once again he tossed them apart, spilling the harpoons and lances from the two mates' boats, while Ahab's boat emerged almost unscathed. As Dagu and Queequeg worked to repair the strained planks, the whale swam away from them and turned, revealing one entire side as he shot past them again. At that moment, a quick cry rang out. Lashed tightly to the fish's back, tangled in the coils of the lines that had wrapped around him during the night, the half-torn body of the Parsee was seen. His black clothing tattered to shreds, his wide eyes locked onto old Ahab. The harpoon fell from Ahab's hand. "Fooled! Fooled!" Taking a long, lean breath. "I, Parsee, I see you again. I and you go before, and this then is the hearse you promised. But I hold you to the last letter of your word. Where is the second hearse? Away, mates, to the ship. Those boats are useless now. Repair them if you can in time and return to me. If not, Ahab is enough to die. Down, men. The first thing that tries to jump from this boat, I will harpoon. You are not other men, but my arms and my legs. So obey me. Where's the whale? Gone down again?" But he looked too close at the boat, for as if intent on escaping with the corpse he bore, and as if the location of their last encounter had only been a stop on his leeward journey, Moby Dick was now swimming steadily forward. He had almost passed the ship, which had thus far been sailing in the opposite direction, although for the moment her forward motion had been stopped. He seemed to be swimming at full speed, intent only on following his own straight path in the sea. "Oh, Ahab," cried Starbuck, "it's not too late, even now, on the third day, to give up. Look, Moby Dick is not seeking you. It is you who madly seek him." Setting sail to the rising wind, the lonely boat was quickly pushed to leeward by both oars and canvas. When Ahab passed by the vessel, close enough to clearly see Starbuck's face as he leaned over the rail, he called for him to turn the ship around and follow him, not too quickly, but at a cautious distance. Glancing upwards, he saw Tashtego, Queequeg, and Dagu eagerly climbing to the three mastheads, while the oarsmen rocked in the two damaged boats that had just been hoisted to the side, busy working on their repairs. As he sped past, he caught glimpses of Stubb and Flask working on deck among bundles of new harpoons and lances. As he observed all this, as he heard the hammers in the broken boats, far different hammers seemed to be driving nails into his heart. But he rallied. Noticing that the vane or flag was gone from the main masthead, he shouted to Tashtego, who had just reached that perch, to come down for another flag, a hammer, and some nails to secure it to the mast. Whether it was due to fatigue from the 3 days' relentless pursuit or the burden he was carrying, the white whale's speed now seemed to decrease as the boat rapidly closed in on him, though indeed the whale's last surge had not been as long as the previous one. And still, as Ahab glided over the waves, the relentless sharks accompanied him, sticking so closely to the boat and continuously biting at the oars that the blades became jagged and splintered with almost every dip. Don't mind them. Those teeth will only give new rowlocks to your oars. Pull on. It's better to rest against the shark's jaw than in the yielding water. But with every bite, sir, the thin blades are getting smaller. They'll last long enough. Pull on. But who can tell, he muttered, whether these sharks swim to feast on the whale or on Ahab. But pull on. Yes, all alive now. We're getting close to him. The helm. Take the helm. Let me pass. And saying this, 2 of the oarsmen helped him forward to the front of the speeding boat. Finally, as the boat was turned to one side and ran alongside the white whale, it seemed strangely unaware of their advance, as whales sometimes do, and Ahab was right within the mist thrown off by the whale's spout, which curled around his great mountainous hump. He was close enough when, with his body arched back and both arms raised high, he hurled his fierce harpoon and even fiercer curse into the hated whale. As both steel and curse sank into the whale, as if sucked into a morass, Moby Dick twisted sideways. He rolled his near flank against the bow, and without breaking a hole in it, he suddenly tipped the boat over, so that if it hadn't been for the raised part of the gunwale, to which he clung, Ahab would have been tossed back into the sea. As it was, 3 of the oarsmen, who were not prepared for the sudden action, were thrown out, but they fell in such a way that 2 of them quickly grabbed the gunwale again and climbed back into the boat on a wave, while the 3rd man helplessly dropped behind, but still stayed afloat and began swimming. Almost at the same moment, the white whale shot through the churning sea with an incredible burst of speed. But when Ahab shouted to the steersman to adjust the line and hold it tight, and ordered the crew to turn around and pull the boat toward their target, the moment the treacherous line felt that double strain, it snapped in the air. What's breaking inside me? Is it a muscle? No, it's fine again. Oars! Oars! Rush in on him! Hearing the massive boat crashing through the waves, the whale turned to face them, but as it did, it spotted the ship nearby. It seemed to see the ship as the source of all its troubles, maybe even a bigger and nobler enemy, and suddenly it charged toward the ship's prow, smashing its jaws in a spray of foam. Ahab staggered. His hand hit his forehead. I'm going blind! Hands! Stretch out in front of me so I can feel my way. Is it night? The whale! The ship? Shouted the terrified oarsman. Oars! Oars! Lower yourself into the depths, O sea, so I can slide this last time onto my target. I see it. The ship! The ship! Push on, my men! Won't you save my ship? But as the oarsmen forced the boat through the pounding waves, the already damaged front of two planks broke apart, and in an instant, the boat was nearly level with the water, with its crew frantically trying to patch the holes and bail out the flooding water. Meanwhile, for that one moment, Tashtego's hammer hung in the air, and the red flag wrapped around him like a plaid, then streamed out behind him like his heart racing forward. Starbuck and Stubb, standing on the bowsprit below, saw the approaching monster just as he did. The whale! The whale! Steer the helm! Oh, sweet powers of air, hold me close! Don't let Starbuck die if he must die in a faint! Steer the helm, I say! Look out for its jaw! Is this the end of all my prayers? All my lifelong loyalties? Oh, Ahab, look at your work. Steady, helmsman, steady. No, no, steer the helm again. He's turning to face us. Oh, his relentless brow heads toward someone who knows he cannot run away. My God, be with me now. Don't stand near me. Stand under me. Whoever can help Stubb, do it now. Stubb is stuck here too. I grin at you, grinning whale. Who has ever helped Stubb or kept him awake but his own watchful eye? And now poor Stubb is going to bed on a mattress that's too soft. I wish it were stuffed with brushwood. I grin at you, grinning whale. You, sun, moon, and stars, I call you assassins of a good man who ever breathed. Even so, I'd still drink with you if you just hand me the cup. Oh, grinning whale, but there will be plenty of gulping soon. Why don't you run away, Ahab? For me, off with my shoes and jacket, let Stubb die in his underwear. A most rotten and oversalted death, though. Cherries! Cherries! Oh, Flask, give me one red cherry before we die. Cherries? I only wish we were where they grow. Oh, Stubb, I hope my poor mother has received my pay by now. If not, few coins will come to her, because this voyage is over. On the ship's bow, nearly all the sailors hung around, inactive. Hammers, bits of plank, lances, and harpoons clumsily held in their hands as they stopped working, their enchanted eyes fixed on the whale, which swung its enormous head from side to side, sending a wide band of foam before it as it charged ahead. Retribution, swift vengeance, and eternal malice were all written on its face, and despite everything humans could do, the solid white wall of its forehead slammed into the ship's starboard bow, causing men and timbers to stagger. Some fell flat on their faces. The harpooneers' heads shook on their bull-like necks. Through the breach, they heard the water rushing in like mountain torrents down a flume. The ship! The hearse! The second hearse! Ahab shouted from the boat. Its wood can only be American. Diving beneath the settling ship, the whale glided along its keel, but then turned underwater and shot back to the surface far off the other bow, close to Ahab's boat, where it lay still for a moment. I turned my back to the sun. What's up, Tashtego? Let me hear your hammer. Oh, you three unyielding masts, you unbroken keel, you only God-bullied hull, you sturdy deck, proud helm, and pole-pointed prow, death-glorious ship, will you perish without me? Am I cut off from the last pride of even the most ordinary shipwrecked captains? Oh, lonely death in a lonely life. Now I feel my greatest strength lies in my greatest sorrow. Ho! From all your furthest corners pour in now, bold waves of my entire past, and top this towering wave of my death. Toward you I roll, you all-destroying but unconquering whale. To the end, I fight with you. From hell's heart, I stab at you. For hate's sake, I spit my last breath at you. Sink all coffins and hearses into one common pool. Since neither can be mine, Let me tow you to pieces while still chasing you, even if tied to you, you damned whale. Thus, I give up the spear." The harpoon was thrown, the struck whale shot forward, the line raced through the grooves with incredible speed, until it got tangled. Ahab bent down to clear it. He managed to do so, but the line wrapped around his neck, and voicelessly, like a Turkish mute strangling his victim, he was thrown out of the boat before the crew even realized he was gone. The next moment, the heavy eye splice at the end of the rope flew out of the empty tub, knocked down an oarsman, and disappeared into the depths. For a moment, the stunned crew stood still, then turned. "The ship? Great God, where is the ship?" Soon, through the dim, confusing haze, they saw the ghostly outline of the ship fading away, like in a mirage. Only the uppermost masts remained above water, while fixed by infatuation, loyalty, or fate, the pagan harpooneers still kept their lookout on the sea from their once high perches. Now, circular waves surrounded the lone boat and all its crew, along with every floating oar and lance pole, spinning, both animate and inanimate, all caught in a vortex that pulled the smallest piece of the Pequod out of sight. As the last of the waves rushed over the submerged Indian at the mainmast, leaving just a few inches of the upright spar visible, along with long streams of the flag that waved ironically over the churning waters. At that moment, a red arm and hammer hovered upward, ready to nail the flag faster to the sinking spar. A hawk, which had followed the main truck down from its home among the stars, pecking at the flag and bothering Tashtego, now happened to get its wide, fluttering wing caught between the hammer and the wood. Simultaneously, feeling that ethereal thrill, the submerged Indian, in his dying gasp, froze his hammer there. And so the heavenly bird, with shrieks worthy of an archangel, its imperial beak raised, and its whole body wrapped in Ahab's flag, went down with his ship, which, like Satan, refused to sink to hell until it had dragged a living part of heaven down with it, wearing it as a helmet. Now small birds flew screaming over the yawning chasm. A sullen white surf pounded against its steep sides. Then everything collapsed, and the great shroud of the sea rolled on as it had for 5,000 years. Epilogue, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Job. The drama is over. So why does anyone step forward? Because one person survived the wreck. After the Parsi disappeared, I was the one fate chose to take Ahab's place as bowsman when the previous bowsman took on a different role. On the last day, when the three men were thrown from the rocking boat, I was the one who was left behind. Floating at the edge of the scene and watching it unfold, I was slowly drawn toward the swirling vortex created by the sunken ship. By the time I reached it, it had calmed into a creamy pool. I went round and round, ever closer to the button-like black bubble at the center of that slowly spinning circle, revolving like another Ixion. When I reached that vital center, the black bubble burst upward. Now free because of its clever mechanism and buoyant enough to rise with great force, the coffin life buoy shot out of the sea, toppled over, and floated beside me. Buoyed by that coffin, I drifted on a soft, mournful sea for almost a whole day and night. The harmless sharks glided past as if their mouths were locked shut, and the fierce sea hawks flew overhead with their beaks hidden. On the second day, a sail appeared, coming closer, until it finally picked me up. It was the wandering ship Rachel, which was searching for its missing crew, but instead found another orphan.